All right, well, welcome everybody to the second of our 8-part webinar series this winter. So every Wednesday from now until the end of February, we're going to have a different webinar that looks at a different aspect of our urban natural areas. So tonight we're going to be speaking with two local foresters, Astrid Nielsen and Cédric Bertrand. And we set this up as a panel discussion, so we've got some prepared questions, but if you have questions, just post them in the chat and we will answer as many as we can when we finish up. So next week, we're going to be diving into Weeding 101 with Nora Lee, and she's with the Wild Pollinator Partners as well as with Friends of Carlington Woods. So if you're interested in her webinar, she's going to be coming up in about 2 seconds, I think. Nora, can you want to give a little bit of a preview of what you're going to be doing next week?
Sure. I'm not going to show you anything. I just wanted to summarize. I'm going to do it in 4 sections. What is a weed? Why do we weed? How to recognize a weed? And there's no trick to that. It's just well, there are some tricks, but mostly it's learning what they look like. And weed management. So everything from, preventing weeds to how to, easy ways to get rid of them, pull them out of the ground or dig them out, whichever. Yeah, so probably aiming, I don't do any chemical means for the most part, so it'll be natural methods and focused on more the sort of ornamental garden and potentially pollinator type gardens. So.
Okay. Do they need to bring anything with them for the webinar, or should they be prepared with anything, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll let you know if anything comes to my mind, but I don't think so. If I've got questions for sure, I'll try and answer them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Nora, and hopefully we'll see a lot of people next week at that one too. So we're going to start now, and let me just get the next one up here. So this is just a quick biography of both of our speakers tonight. So Astrid is a local resident. She lives right here in Kitchissippi Ward, and she works in the private sector as a forestry consultant. She's been a sessional lecturer, still is, I believe, at the University of Toronto, and has been the general manager of the Eastern Ontario Model Forest for 5 years, or was, pardon me. And I won't go through all of your education there. People can read it for themselves. And Cédric, he's with the National Capital Commission and has been an urban forester there for almost 5 years. And before that, he was 5 years with project manager at Tree Canada and 2 years as a City of Ottawa forester. So that gives him a very nice broad range of experience as well. He also helped to launch the Air Ouvert program, in Gatineau, and that's an urban forestry and greening program. So let's just start right in, and we've got some of your bio up here, but I'd like to know, what are some of the formative experiences that you had? What was your training like? What made you want to be a forester in the first place? So Astrid, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, it's a bit of an interesting how I fell into forestry. When I graduated from high school here in Ottawa, I went out west as far as I could, right almost to the end. I didn't quite hop over to Victoria, but I made it out to Vancouver, and I studied at UBC. And then I started off sort of finding my way into an environmental studies program, but it was a little bit general and I wanted something a little more specific. And this was the time, and maybe some of you will remember the Clayoquot Sound era, when there were tons of protests starting about old growth logging. And I was just fascinated. I was certainly fascinated with the forests out there. Of course, they're so beautiful, and how can you not be enamored with them? And then also just people knew about the forest. I would talk to people and they would be passionate about the forest. So I was like, maybe this forestry thing would be a cool thing. Anyways, I looked into it, and the rest is history. Yeah, so I studied forestry there, and then I did a few years after I graduated from there, went and did my master's at U of T. And the training, the undergrad, well, and masters as well, they're pretty it's an applied program, so it's quite hands-on, but you do quite a bit of theoretical. I would say half and half, theoretical and hands-on. Interesting to note, back then, which was a while ago, there was no discussion of urban forestry. I'd never even heard of the term by then. So it had been developed, the term, but I didn't know about it. And I'll just add one more tidbit that my grandfather was a forester in Germany. My father also is a forester, and my brother studied forestry at UMB. So it's in the blood.
Wow, you come by it honestly, for sure. I thought that was only like military and sports families that did all.
But it was accidental. I certainly wasn't planning on it.
Well, Cédric, what about you?
It's really interesting because my grandfather is also the reason, well, a bit of the reason why I went into it. You know, he was a great guy. Like I got to know him a bit when he was still alive, and it was just a great person. And we often went fishing, and he lived in the woods in Macham, Quebec. So yeah, I guess it's part of it. When I graduated, I went to a geography, more like a geomatics program. But I don't know, I just had the urge to get to know the species in the forest. Like I wanted to know like all the species. And I'm not sure that I attained that goal yet, but yeah. So I went to I guess I went to New Brunswick just because they accepted me and I didn't need a cégep. So that was a good reason. So yeah, I went there as a 5-year program and forestry sciences. Mm. And over there, I got to have like an experience at the city of Edmundston in New Brunswick, and I just fell in love with this field. And after that, I got a few different experiences with environmental firms and Tree Canada, and I just wanted to get back to being a real urban forester. So I did my master's, which I thought would help me get back into that field, and it did, because as soon as I graduated, I got hired at the city of Ottawa, and I was there for a little less than two years. But and then I had another opportunity at the NCC. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
Astrid and Cédric, you had mentioned, or Astrid, you had mentioned that urban forestry wasn't even a term. When did it sort of become, when did that term sort of come around?
Okay, so some people would like cringe if they knew that I was struggling with it. Jorgensen was a forester who coined the term, and I can't remember what year that was. It was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But it just really wasn't commonplace. And so when I did my master's at U of T, that was in 2001. Andy Kenny, who's like, I call him the urban forest guru. He was a prof there at that time, and he was teaching some urban forestry at that time. Right. So I think that was sort of around the time when it started becoming, so let's say 20 years, it started becoming part of the curriculums a little bit, curriculi a little bit. And then I would say over the last 10 years, it has become more commonplace. Like the city of Ottawa in 2009 had 4 foresters, a few years before that they had 2, and now it's, my guess would be maybe like 8. So it's just in the last 10 years, and there are urban forestry programs too now around the country, which you didn't find 5 years ago even.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, in that case, then it's still sort of a relatively new field then. So what does a typical day look like for you as an urban forester, one in the private sector, one in the public? So again, Astrid, let's start with you. Is there a typical day for you?
Yeah. Well, one of the aspects I like about the work that I'm doing, which is consulting work, I'm self-employed. I have a lot of flexibility, so no 2 days are the same. I usually, about 20% of the work is out in the field. So my field work, most of the work that I do is around infill developments, or I should say development projects. So I write a lot of tree reports for my clients. And so I will go out to a site that's going to be developed, or yeah, and I assess trees. So a lot of the sites, they can be kind of, a lot of them might be rundown houses, kind of sketchy sites. I have to make sure that they're safe to wander, but yeah, that's most of the field work. Sometimes I'll get out into the woods with some different projects, and then the rest is really in front of the computer. And one aspect of it that I quite like is that I deal with a lot of people who often don't know a lot about trees. You know, sometimes they really want to retain the trees, and I work with and will know a lot about trees, and I have clients like that, but sometimes they know very little about them. So I like that because it's an educational opportunity. And so that, you know, it's sort of makes you feel good when you get out there educating people who don't really know much about it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And what about you, Cédric? I mean, it must be a completely different story for you being with the NCC. You've got a lot of territory to cover.
Yes, that's right. Well, for me, you know, it's I'm either in the field or at the office or at home these days. So my work consists of basically like an internal consultant. So for project managers, for people that work in the environment and in general. So basically I'm involved because we're not a lot of foresters. So every time there's a project where a tree is in it or in the vicinity of it, I'm basically involved. Yeah. So I give my professional opinion and expertise to these people. In order to try to save as many trees as possible. And I do also tree inventories. You know, I'm in the field to analyze insects and disease and invasive species and, you know, all sorts of things. But yeah, that's what I do. I review all sorts of documents on a day-to-day basis, and I'm out in the field doing all sorts of things. So
well,
yeah.
It sounds pretty good though, because I mean, some people don't get, you know, that nice balance, right? So it's just like half reading, you know, stuff that you need to do, and then half having the fun part of it, right? So, I mean, there must be certain things that you can do, or challenge, like either challenges or opportunities that that an urban forester has that somebody that, say, you know, works in an Algonquin park doesn't. Can you speak to, you know, like maybe one of each, like what's a challenge, what's an opportunity that you know, maybe your rural colleagues might not have? Well, so whoever wants to start with that one.
For me, you know, the opportunity, that the reason why I fell in love with it is because I'm an urban person, you know, at the base. Like I grew up, you know, a few minutes away from Parliament Hill. So and to me, so it's like the perfect balance between trees, forest, and woodlots, and being in a city as a citizen of our region. So to me, that's good. It's a great opportunity to just do everything that I want to do at night I have a family, and I am able to come back every night. Whereas I had an experience before when I used to work like in northern Quebec, and you would go away for most of the week, and then you come back for the weekend, and sometimes it's even longer. So that's a big difference between typical forester, I would say, and an urban forester.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the challenges, well, it's really different, because typical forester will, they're growing trees for the wood, for the resource, whereas we're growing trees for the ecological services.
Mm-hmm.
So we really want to, when we're planting trees, we really want to have these trees grow and to become mature, because as they mature, they are providing more services for the population. So yeah, that's what I would say right now.
Astrid?
Yeah. I would say, well, I think a challenge, I have a couple of examples that are both challenges and opportunities. I think it depends on how you frame them. And I think conventional forestry, you do deal with people, but not at the same level that you do as in urban forestry. And that's why I really like urban forestry, because I like people a lot. So I like working with people. So but a lot of foresters, well, at least the ones that I did my undergrad with, I think it's changing a lot, but in my experiences, foresters didn't necessarily always really like people. Like they'd study forestry, they'd like you be in the woods, right?
They tend to be introverts, right? I think a lot of naturalists tend to be, introverts.
Totally. Yeah. So again, it's generalizing, but yeah. So I've heard people say that. So I think, that's one thing about urban forestry that I do like, is the people. And then I did think of another example just now, and it's completely escaped my mind. Oh yeah, I was going to say, so in conventional forestry, there's more rules because it's been around for so long. So there's a lot of rules that dictate what you do. And some people like that. In urban forestry, because it's relatively new, we're kind of making things up as we go along in a lot of situations. Nobody wants to tell you that, but sometimes that's it. So and I think that's exciting. Like, I think it's exciting. You're forging a path. Sometimes it's stressful. Sometimes it makes the job more challenging, but it can also make way for making some great strides and changes.
I can see that there would be room for experimentation, especially on smaller spaces that might be able to be, scaled up in cases like that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in a conventional forestry situation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Now, I mean, one thing I'm personally having trouble with is just keeping up with all of the research that comes out about urban forestry, and now about, the connections of trees and how they talk to each other, and the mycorrhizal fungal networks and all of the rest of it that Suzanne Simard has just, blown the lid off of everything. What are some of your go-to resources? How do you keep up with all of that in your professional development? Like, do you have particular resources that you would recommend that we look at, or is it mainly, just your own professional work that you keep in current with?
There's for me, there's a lot of very interesting webinars that I attend to. Especially during the winter months. Seems to be a lot more webinars in the winter months, which is good. And going to conferences. I've been to the last CUFC, which is the Canadian Urban Forest Conference, and this year was it was in Charlottetown. So it was right after the Fiona hurricane, and it was just incredible to see, like, the trees over there. We usually at the CUFC, we usually on the Tuesday afternoon, we go out and we have like site visits. We can choose different site visits to do, and because of Fiona, it was canceled, and so we ended up like all of us together because we have experience with trees, and it had happened like just a week prior. We helped out the city over there. Wow. and did some we analyzed the trees that were down and some that were still standing, but were they dangerous or not? Should the city fell them? And so we gathered and we helped them out. So that was really good. But at these conferences, yeah, we a lot of the new research is being shared, and there are also researchers that are in attendance. And so that's how I do. And also, if you are ISA certified, the ISA International Society of Arboriculture, they are sharing some articles, and as well as the OPFA, Ontario Professional Foresters Association, and the OEFQ, which is the Ordre des Ingénieurs Forestiers du Québec, also are sharing some articles. So it's a mix of everything. So, like you said, there's a lot. There's a lot coming in. So yeah.
Well, it doesn't seem to be as controversial, I think, anymore. I think that's the one thing I have sort of learned, that some of the myths and stuff that got busted through Suzanne Simard's work in particular. So, but Astrid, what about you? Any really go-to resources that even the lowly lay people can access?
Yeah, and I can actually send you a link to follow up to some of the resources that Cédric mentioned, some of them, which are great, and I use a lot of those. And the webinars are great because it's just so easy to plug in over lunch. Yeah. Even if I'm doing something that doesn't require a lot of brain activity, then I can sort of tune in the background, and it's great. And so the Canadian Institute of Forestry, sometimes they hold webinars, and sometimes they focus on urban forestry. Urban Forestry Today from the University of Massachusetts, that's a great one. I really like their webinars. Range of topics, and usually always from academics, so high quality speakers. That's great. Ontario Urban Forest, the Urban Forest Council, I don't know if that was mentioned, I can't remember. And then some books. I thought I mentioned some of the books that I use. Did you want me to mention those? Like, is that helpful?
Yeah, sure.
Well, as I already mentioned, the Trees of Canada. Oh, maybe it's not. So maybe I'll send these trees. And it goes back. I mean, it's great. You're going to see it backwards. The Trees of Canada. That's a key one. And then I use ISA best management practices. So when I would say, so there are some guidelines that are sort of acceptable in the industry. So I do use those for managing trees during construction. And then I have also a big book here on diseases in trees and shrubs that I use. So constantly looking things up. That's part of it. There's always something new to learn. And just it's a constant education for me, for sure.
Well, that leads really nicely, because as you know, there is always something new to learn. And one of the things that I know that the city has gotten away, like the city of Ottawa in particular has gotten away from, is that thought that the idea that nature will regenerate on its own. Well, it just won't in an urban setting, really, when we're constantly sort of, using these spaces, right? So, that's a misconception that I think has been sort of busted. Are there other myths within your industry that, or are there arguments within your industry that are still not settled as to, like maybe what is the best route forward in climate changing world when it comes to urban forestry? Cédric, you want to start that off?
Sure. I think what an myth is just you're planting a tree, and that's good and everything, but you know, trees, they need to be taken care of. And sometimes the people that are taking care of the trees, they go very close to these trees with the mowers and the trimmers and all that. So it creates a lot of mechanical damage. Trees, same thing with the staking. So usually when we're planting a tree, we're used to seeing, you know, stakes being there with these little guys and everything. Depending on the size of the tree, if the tree is really large caliper size, usually it may not even need to be staked. It's actually better in certain conditions. Like, I'm not saying if we're planting a tree really close to the Ottawa River, really exposed to wind, you know, in this case, yes, I would agree. But in places that are more sheltered from the wind, you know, sometimes it's even better to not have stakes, because the trees, they need to sway a little bit with the wind. So this sway will encourage the trees to produce some anchoring roots. And so the root system will develop more rapidly. And so that's kind of what we want when we're planting a tree, for its roots to disperse and to really anchor itself, basically. So sometimes there are two stakes, and they're kind of, you know, like one's like this and the other one's like this, and it's super, super tight. And people have some good intentions usually when they're planting a tree, and they but they kind of forget about them afterwards, and it strangles them. And they can't grow in this area, and sometimes they die. Same thing with the you know, the mechanical damage that's, you know, year after year. If it happens once, that's fine, tree's going to survive. But it's the year after year after year. It's you know, and you know, I've seen that a lot in my life, not necessarily here, but I've seen that in my life a lot. And I still see it every day on the internet. I'm in you know, LinkedIn, and there's an urban forestry group over there, and yeah, it's just it saddens me. It kind of amazes me at the same time. But anyways, it's just, we need to have the word out. We need people to know, you know, the proper way of doing things is, you know, planting a tree is great, but you know, what comes afterwards also, it's very necessary.
Astrid, did you want to add to that?
Sure. I would say down woody debris is my myth buster misconception that I wish sort of was, I wish it was better understood by the general public on the benefits of and down woody debris, the technical term that we use for a downfall. So if a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't necessarily need to be cleaned up. Of course, if it's crossing a path, or if there's a risk that it's still posing because it's fallen halfway down, etc. You know, then in those cases it may need to be dealt with. But even the city, when they cut trees, they leave them in the natural areas, they leave them there. And it may look messy in some people's eyes, but the mess is, that's what a forest should look like, because that debris is providing a multitude of habitats, or habitats for a multitude of species, and it's really creating that diversity in this structural diversity in the forest, and that's what you need to really increase diversity. So it's a really beneficial to have that, and it's creating new soil as well. So we want to keep that on the ground as much as possible. So that I would say that's probably the one that, you know, I'm constantly trying to show people or talk about.
I'm glad you said that, because that leads kind of into the next one too, because I know a lot of the people who are on here tonight and who will be watching the video after when we load it up, they really do care about the Hampton and the Carlington woods, and they want to do right by them. But sometimes it's hard to know exactly what we should be doing. And maybe it's a question of just not doing anything at all. Maybe that's the best thing that we can. But what are some of the things that even individuals or community groups like ours can do? And what are some of the priorities that maybe we should be looking at? Like maybe we're not focusing on the right things. Cédric, you want to start that off?
Sure. I'd say, I'm not sure if they're on the call, but I've heard that some people from FCF we're going to be there. So the NCC has been working with FCF stands for Forêt Capitale Forest, so Capital Forest.
Yep.
And we've been pleasantly surprised. Like very, they're amazing. And one thing that they're doing, and they're doing it well, is like I said, when we're having you know, tree plantings, they sometimes they're involved, and when they're involved, they're not only involved like before and during, they're very involved in you know, afterwards as well. They have often people that are going in to check, like even though the planting has occurred many months ago, they have people that actually go back there and they're checking on the state of the planting. You know, or did some die? What would be the reason for this? They're taking care of the trees, you know, remulching. They also have like water totes that are being installed on site. So if they see that some trees are in need of watering, they can do that themselves.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that's really impressive, and that's really new, because it never used to be like that. It was just planting, and then you know, exactly, you just walk away, and then you don't even know what happens to, you know, this planting afterwards. So yeah, I think that's something that the community can do in most cases, and we certainly encourage it.
Okay. And what about in terms of priority? Like, I mean, I think one of the things that I think you guys are probably struggling with is what species to really plant in a climate changing world, right? Like which species will be better off in the future? Because you know, I hear sugar maples, they're not going to be doing better in warmer weather. So, you know, Astrid, maybe you wanted to jump in on that question as well.
Would you like me to talk about the species specifically, or just the general question about what Hampton Park?
Both.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just going to say, with regards to what you guys are already doing in Hampton Park and Carlington Woods, I don't know as well, but I know the work that's being done in Hampton Park is, I mean, it's fantastic. I think just engaging residents, educating them through actions such as the pulling of invasives, planting, and with a spongy moth when you were trapping the caterpillars, like all of that is just fantastic in my view. People are asking the questions, you've posted signs. Yeah, so I find these parks, they're just facing so many more stresses these days with the increase in populations, and then COVID got people out of the house, which is great in a sense that you know, I think we need to, I'm really big on increasing our connection with nature. Actually, I forgot to mention a book. I'm sure some of you guys have, if you haven't heard of it, I recommend writing this one down because it's just, it blows me away. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass.
Oh,
and
yes.
so it's a botanist, an indigenous botanist, she's a professor, and her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she just goes and tells the most amazing stories about the connection with nature. And it's anyway, so I think the work that is being done already is great because it's encouraging that. What I would like to see in these smaller forests, because of the increasing pressure, is a little more strategy behind it, management plans that can be developed for each of them, and that would be at the community level. So if everybody has some input into the management plan, you'll get more buy-in on actually implementing and seeing it through. So that's my forestry background speaking there. Having a management plan. I mean, that's in an ideal world. I know we've got a ways to get to the point where we're doing that for our smaller woodlots, but it would be great if we can get to that point.
Yeah. Well, we're getting there. We have drafted objectives for both the Hampton and Carlington woods over 5 years that we're trying to sort of get everybody on board with. So
that's super. That's great.
So okay, we talked a little bit about maybe the need to look at different species as we're coming up. I'm starting to maybe think pawpaw. But how would you sort of describe the state of Ottawa's trees now? Like, I mean, we've got roughly anywhere between 30 and 40% canopy ranges depending on the neighborhood. But what's in comparison with, say, other cities across Canada, how's Ottawa doing?
Yeah. Do you want me to take a stab at this one first?
Sure.
I mean, we've got the green belt here, so we're really lucky, and that increases our canopy. I find so the course that I teach at U of T, we stop at different municipalities. We spend a couple of weeks visiting different municipalities through Ontario and into Quebec. And I do find that the level of intensification that's happening in Ottawa is quite unique in my experience, from what I've seen. It's not like this everywhere. It's on the outskirts of the GTA. It seems to be like that. Peterborough is experiencing the same, but it's not the same everywhere. So the level of intensification, just my own anecdotal experience, is quite high. So that's definitely a threat on the urban forest. And then but I think in terms of how we're doing with regards to other cities, I think again, we've still got a relatively high canopy, but I think we really need to keep managing it and managing it well, and planting as many trees and planting them well, if we want to maintain that canopy and increase it as the city of Ottawa is hoping to do.
Yeah. Cédric?
I think it's it's a case by case basis. Every city is different. It really depends on how the city was built in the first place. So I think in general, I think Ottawa is doing well, and like Astrid said, we have the green belt, we have Gatineau Park, and we have lots of space to go and hang out, and we have these wonderful city parks as well. So I think in general, the people of the region are well served when it comes to trees and nature. So I think we would make a lot of citizens from other cities envious.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But we can never rest on our green laurels, right? So Last question, then we'll open up to a few in the chat. I think there are definitely some questions coming into the chat. I know that, people have some climate anxiety. We're bombarded with a lot of bad news. What keeps you guys going? What makes you want to keep doing this? Astrid, you start us off.
Yeah. Well, just interesting on the CBC this morning. They were covering this topic, which is an example I always provide to my students, because it can be difficult sometimes. And sometimes I wish I didn't know as much as I did. Sometimes I wish I could just walk through Hampton Park and not see the Norway maple in the understory, and like just see it as a forest, and a beautiful forest that it is. So I wish I didn't know about the invasive species as much as I do. But it was nice to hear this morning. The story was about the ozone layer. So this is what I always tell my students. So there's a couple of examples in the past where we have, through international cooperation, solved some, or almost solved, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but we've done put a big dent in solving some pretty big environmental challenges, such as the ozone layer. I think of acid rain as well. So I recognize that these are not anywhere near the extent of climate change, but it does, to me, it's my way of saying it gives me hope. And so that's one thing I think of. Teaching for me, the students I see each year, over the 8 years I've been doing it, I love, they give me energy. They give me hope. They're always amazing. They love to learn, and they're all about, they're just so progressive and so much about, they really work hard to be inclusive and think a lot about diversity. So it's our future, and that gives me hope. So I would say, those, and thinking globally and acting locally as much as I can in my own everyday life.
Yeah. Great. How about you, Cédric?
Yeah, me too. I'd say I'm a positive person. I'm hopeful for the future. It's tough because we're hearing all of these bad news when it comes to the environment. Every person needs to do better, kind of thing, and the companies as well. That's for sure. But the trees, they play an important role, in climate change, and especially in the cities with urban heat islands. So me, I'm involved a lot with the plantings. So that's my thing. We need to be better overall, the urban foresters overall, to plan plantings and plant trees the right way, so that they can survive for a long time. There was I've read a research article many years ago in my master's, and I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was very low. I think it was like in more American cities, where it mentioned that trees that are really like in the core area, they didn't last long. Yeah. They're planted, and then they're replaced, after 10 years, 15 years. So we certainly need to do better, and to find ways to make these trees live and become mature. So, and that's the only way that the urban heat islands are going to be mitigated. And so that it's very, very important. So I think for me, what keeps me going, what I like about my job is I'm outdoors, so I tell myself, on a beautiful day, this is amazing. This is my job. I can't believe this is my job. Like I'm walking, in Gatineau Park or in Greenbelt, and I'm like, wow, this is like, you hear the birds and everything. And I can't help but think of people that don't have the same chances as I have. They're, in an office setting, from 9 to 5 all weekend, and I really, I'm glad that this is what I'm doing, as a job. And also, for my kids, like I need to stay positive. I need to have that mindset, because I certainly don't want my kid to live in a bad place, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to just stop this share for a second. And Erica, have you been checking on any questions in the chat?
Oh yeah, there's lots.
Okay, well, do you want to fire one out maybe? I haven't looked at any of them, so
I'll start right from the beginning. So this is a really great question. It's for Cédric. Is there any active buckthorn management at the NCC? Like along the experimental farm, multi-use pathways between Maitland and Woodruff, lots of trees are being planted, but the buckthorn is spreading in that area.
Mm-hmm. It's yes, there's definitely some management, but we have like it's a big region, so I think it's part of the strategy, a little bit, like strategy touches on it a little bit. So it got adopted, forest strategy, it got adopted in 2021, and it's all the way to 2026. And right now we're a really small team. It's just me and another forester, and there's another forester that works on in urban lands, but and there's some biologists as well. But yeah, we do some for sure. There's definitely place for more, but yeah, we're unlike the city of Ottawa, we're not a lot of people. So, and we kind of do our best with what we can do in a day. Basically, it's just it's a lot. So there, in the strategy, there's 20 actions that we have to do by 2026, and tree planting, like we want to. For example, we want to plant 100,000 trees by 2026. This is a lot of work, and it needs us to work on it, basically on a weekly basis. But this is just one of the 20 actions. So
you need more employees.
Probably, I'm not the one who decides this, but I think with the team that we have, we are doing amazing things. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there's several really good questions in the chat, and I'll just go down through them. Cédric, did you have any opportunity to advise on the design of the new civic hospital campus? There have been a lot of concerns about the number of trees cut down.
Yeah, I know about this project. Yes, and yeah, I'm not sure what I can say about this. But yeah, I'm aware of the project, and it's it's a City of Ottawa project, and I know that the NCC and as well the I think it's BSPC are also involved in looking over and giving some input, and so yeah, I'm aware of the project. I'm not sure exactly how much I can
Yeah. It's a tricky one, so don't worry about that. So why don't we get on to another question anyway?
Yeah, it is a difficult one, definitely. Okay, here's a great question for both panelists. What opportunities in urban forestry in Ottawa are there for advocates and ecology nonprofits that aren't currently being taken advantage of, in your view? What's the best way to embark on these? So if there's a nonprofit organization in our region,
yeah, are there gaps maybe that is that what the question is?
Well, is there an opportunity even for, I suppose you could look at it as even funds, I would hope, through a nonprofit. They always are looking for funds. I'm just reading off the question.
Yeah.
So if William wanted to speak to this, who asked the question?
Yeah, thank you. No, your paraphrases have all been accurate. You know, it's a pretty broad question, so be happy to hear from the panelists.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this, Cédric, if you want. So I'm struggling with the funding aspect, because that's always just, I know there are many grants out there. Federal money seems to be well, more plentiful these days, let's say. And the grants that I think of, you guys are probably familiar with too, sort of on a larger scale, like the 2 billion trees, and also there's been some funding. There was, I think it was cut off in September. Yeah, it was last September, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's if they renew it each year. There was an infrastructure grant for green infrastructure in municipalities, which I thought was pretty cool. So those are the two big ones that I can think of, but other sort of other initiatives, I guess I could say, that aren't necessarily tied to funding that come to my mind. And I know that there's a couple of neighborhoods here in Ottawa that have already embarked on this initiative, and Sharon, we've discussed it before too, and that's the Neighborhoods Inventory Program that I've mentioned Andy Kenny's name before, the Prof Emeritus from U of T, and he thankfully lives in Lanark County, which is pretty close, and he's run workshops for a few different neighborhoods, Blackburn Hamlet and in Canada as well, over the years, and actually not Hampton Park, just nearby.
It's a Massey?
No, just further down by the river, the Champlain Oaks. So they did, yeah. So he's run some workshops there, and basically the idea behind these is training the community to do a tree inventory, and it's all about stewardship and engagement, and then the work, what you can do with that forest inventory, you know, it's limitless. There's so, once you start doing it and understanding the benefits behind it, yeah, there's just so much you can do with that, from basic pitching in with community, with your fellow neighbors to do maintenance work, and just, it's really about getting involved in your trees in your neighborhood. So that's what kind of comes to mind. Another thing that comes to mind for me is their Sustainable Forestry Initiative has come out with some new urban forestry standards. I believe they're still in draft form, but they're probably just about to be released in the final form. And to me, I think this is a way for cities to sort of show off that they are managing their cities, their urban forests sustainably, and manage them well. So it's a checklist, it's a guarantee. It's like a certified forest. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but you know, there are forests that can be certified to Forest Stewardship Council standards, for instance. And when you buy a piece of paper from those that's been FSC certified, then there's a certain guarantee that the tree to make that paper has been harvested sustainably. So it's similar in the sense that the city would have sort of, I call them bragging rights, to say that we're managing our urban forest sustainably. So I think in terms of advocacy, pushing cities and municipalities down that road, they're the first urban forestry standards that have been developed. So those are the things that sort of come to mind on the top of my head.
Okay.
Great. I'll move on to the next one. The next question: what are the boundaries / interface between I'm going to mess up this word, arboriculture and urban forestry? Ugh.
Arboriculture, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. That's an interesting question.
Yeah. So to me, arboriculture is more people that are trained to be arborists. Usually it's a college education that you have, and then you become, through the ISA, you become an arborist, a certified arborist, whereas urban forestry, usually the path is to go to forestry school, and now there's, like Astrid was saying, there's even urban forestry school now, which didn't used to exist. So that's a plus. I think in general, urban forestry is the management of the urban forest. So it's kind of more of a broad scale than arboriculture is more like single tree to tree, single trees. I would say that's the main difference. I think urban forestry is more like holistic, maybe I would say. And usually that's what I would suggest as a.
So would the difference be sort of like the hydro guys who come along and trim the trees? They would be arboriculturists, not an urban forester, right? So that's
That's right. Okay. That's right. Also, a difference is arborists are able to climb trees, which is not something that I'm capable of. So yeah.
Well, we don't have very much time left. We've only got about 3 minutes left. So we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions, but possibly Astrid and Cédric might be willing to at least answer them afterwards, and we can send out some answers after, because I know there's a few left, but maybe we can squeeze 1 or 2 more in. Erica?
Yeah. Here's a good one.
Okay.
So I'm going to just read out some context for this question first. So there is an ongoing dynamic, one could say struggle, between land developers who seek to maximize their site density for economies of scale and profit purposes, and those who seek to protect existing forests, woodlots, and natural areas for quality of life and environmental, forest sustainability, and wildlife survival. So the question is, given the recent Ontario bills to build housing faster, what can be done to ensure the protection, maintenance, and sustainability of urban forests and trees on private public land?
Well, that's a $64,000 question.
Yeah, I know.
We've got a minute left.
I know, we need another webinar for this one, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I can provide an answer, just because I don't know all that's involved in this bill. So because of that, I'm gonna go with Astrid if she has something to.
Yeah, it's $1 million question for sure. It's a tough one. Like that balance, I struggle with it every day in my work, what I'm doing. You know, development, intensification, it's sites. It's really like I work hard with the city foresters, and they work really hard too to try and keep some of the trees on site. But when you take everything into account that's going to happen on that site, it can be really challenging. And when sometimes the trees are maintained, but then I drive by the site. I actually did a little sort of quality assurance to assess my sites 3 to 5 years after construction this past summer, and because yeah, just to get a sense on how many trees were surviving afterwards. Yeah. And unfortunately, you know, the results weren't super super positive because this trees just can't always handle the stress of the construction. So it is very tough. I really think that we do need to focus on establishing new trees. Like it's such an important piece of any sort of, like, we can talk about protecting trees all we want, but if we don't create the habitat and the right environment and plant those trees properly, not only are we going to lose our existing forest, but we're not going to have one in the, you know, a healthy one in the future. So we really, that's sort of my that's you know, if I could say one thing, that's what we really need to focus on.
Yeah.
To maintain that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up too much more time because, I mean, we do have a few extra questions. So if you don't mind, I will send those out to you by email and we'll try and get those answered. But I did want to, you know, give a little bit of time for those. So thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to sort of sum up the evening with? Cédric, why don't you start if there's any sort of last thoughts you'd like to leave us with tonight?
I just think that urban forestry is going to continue to grow, you know, in the coming years. I think the municipalities, you know, in the past, they used to have maybe 1 person, 2 people maybe in that field, and just like the city of Ottawa did, like they're growing. I think it's going to continue to grow. I think it's going to municipalities are realizing, are coming to realize that you know, this field of expertise is very important. It's very important to the people, and you know, just as an example, the 311 for the city of Ottawa, when you're calling 311, you have like a direct link to the for any questions related to trees and any requests related to trees. They did that because there's so many questions about them and requests. So it's just going to be it's going, yeah, I think it's just going to continue to grow and to have a very important role in all of our lives in the future.
Astrid?
If I just, yeah, to add on to what Cédric has said, I think, you know, I think it's really exciting to see so many people interested in this topic. Just coming here tonight and spending like part of your evening listening to people talk about their work with trees, like that's exciting that people are even interested in that. So I think really I'll leave you with my my favorite quote. I actually wrote, I think I wrote it down because, oh, I don't know, it's a Margaret Mead one. No, I didn't write it down.
Is it
but
never?
Basically,
I think I know which one.
That a small group of people can't change the world, and because in fact that's essentially the only people who ever have. So I really believe that change is going to come at the grassroots level. And yeah, you know, I pointed out some of the challenges we have and that we're facing with the loss of trees, but I do think that this interest that Cédric has mentioned, that that there's more foresters out there, there's more people working in the industry. I think we will get healthier forests, and, you know, thank you for everybody being interested, and keep up the great work you're doing. And, yeah.
Oh, and it's also a field that won't get replaced with AI.
Oh, that's true. That's
Artificial
true.
Intelligence. So, yeah.
No, somebody will figure out a way to get a Bowie or a robot in and do all this for you.
Yeah, but we have we may have more time than other other fields for sure.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's going to be great to be the youngsters that are studying with Astrid. Yeah, I think they have a great future.
Yeah, that is a great one to end on. So thank you very much, everybody. And I hope to see most of you next week, perhaps with Nora. And if not, there's lots of other webinars coming up. So thank you all very much for attending tonight, and we'll see you in the woods. Night all.
Thank you.